The great council hall of Valia Prime had never seen such silence. High Counselor Thexera stood at the center of the crystal chamber, while her fellow leaders watched the holographic display above them. The images showed world after world turning dark, empty, dead. 17 star systems had fallen in just one cycle. The devourer swarms moved like a disease through space. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, moons, space stations, ships. Nothing was left behind except empty void and drifting debris. "How many survivors from the Catherine system?" asked Counselor Yithra. Her voice shook as she spoke. She had family on Catherine 3. War Commander Velthon looked down at his data pad. His blue skin had turned pale. "None. The evacuation ships never made it out. The devourers got them all." A soft wail echoed through the chamber. Several counselors began the traditional mourning songs of their people. But Thexera raised her hand for silence. There was no time for grief, not yet. "What word from the galactic hegemony?" she asked. "They refuse to send aid," Velthon replied. "They say the threat is too great. They are pulling back their forces to protect their core worlds." "And the Synthesis Collective?" "The same answer. They call us acceptable losses." Thexera felt her crystalline heart grow cold. The great powers of the galaxy had abandoned them. Species that claimed to stand for peace and cooperation had turned their backs when help was truly needed. "The Eternal Network?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "They have sealed their borders. No ships in or out. They say they must preserve their ancient knowledge for future generations." The chamber fell silent again. Outside the great windows, Thexera could see the refugee ships arriving from the outer colonies. Millions of Valians fleeing their homes, with nothing but the clothes on their bodies. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. "There is one option left," said Elder Kethan. He was the oldest member of the council. His voice was weak, but his mind was still sharp. "The Forbidden Protocols." Every counselor turned to stare at him. The Forbidden Protocols had not been spoken of in over 200 cycles. They contained information about species deemed too dangerous for normal contact. "You cannot mean—" Thexera began. "The Deathworlders," Kethon said quietly. "The humans." A wave of fear rippled through the chamber. Humans. The species so violent that first contact had resulted in 3 diplomatic disasters. They had been quarantined to their sector of space by order of the Galactic Assembly. Most civilized species avoided them completely. "They are barbarians," protested Counselor Markson. "They solve everything with violence. Their worlds are death traps. Their culture celebrates war." "Yes," said Kethon, "which is exactly what we need right now." Thexera studied the tactical display. The devourer swarms were only 3 systems, away from Valia Prime. At their current rate of advance, they would arrive in less than 10 rotations. The Valian defense fleet was already broken. They had maybe 50 ships left. The devourers had thousands. "Even if we contacted them," she said slowly, "why would they help us? We have never shown them friendship. We have actively avoided them for generations." "Because," said War Commander Velthon, "they are the only species in the galaxy that might actually enjoy fighting these things." 3,000 light-years away, Admiral Taman Park stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Indomitable. He was reviewing the morning reports when the communication alert sounded. His second-in-command, Commander So-Young Kim, approached with a puzzled look on her face. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission on the emergency frequency. It is from outside, human space." Taman raised an eyebrow. "Outside human space? That is unusual. Who is sending it?" "The signal appears to be coming from the Valian Confederation, sir. The Universal Translator is having some trouble with their language patterns, but the message seems to be some kind of distress call." Taman felt a chill run down his spine. The Valians were one of the more advanced species in the galaxy. They had technology that was centuries ahead of humanity in some areas. If they were calling for help, something was very wrong. "Put the message through," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life. A tall, crystalline being appeared. Its face was hard to read, but Taman could see fear in its large, dark eyes. The being began to speak in its musical language. The computer translation appeared as text at the bottom of the screen. People of Earth. I am High Counselor Thexara of the Valian Confederation. We have never spoken before. Our species have kept apart by choice, but now we must break that silence. We are dying. The image changed to show space battles. Massive swarms of dark organic ships tearing through enemy fleets. Planets being stripped bare by mechanical creatures. Cities burning as alien monsters, poured from the sky. An enemy we call the Devourers has entered our space. They consume everything in their path. 17 of our star systems have fallen. Our fleets are broken. Our allies have abandoned us. The great powers of the galaxy refuse to help. The image returned to Thexara. Her crystalline form seemed dimmer now. Desperate. We know what your species thinks of us. We know what the galaxy thinks of you. You are called Deathworlders, barbarians, too violent for civilized contact. But perhaps that is what we need now. Perhaps only those who understand war can stop this threat. Taman felt his hands clench into fists. He had heard those words before. Deathworlders, barbarians, too violent. The same insults that had been used to justify keeping humanity isolated from the rest of the galaxy. We offer everything we have, Thexara continued. Our technology, our resources, our eternal friendship. We only ask that you consider our plea. We are 3 rotations from total extinction. If you can hear this message, if you have any compassion, in your hearts, please help us. We have nowhere else to turn. The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent. Taman stared at the empty screen for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited for orders. Sir? Commander Kim asked quietly. What are your instructions? Taman turned to face his communications officer. Send a message to Earth Command. Priority, Alpha. Tell them we have received a distress call from an alien species requesting military assistance against an unknown threat. And what should we recommend, sir? Taman looked back at the screen where the desperate alien had pleaded for help. He thought about all the times humanity had been dismissed as too crude, too violent, too dangerous for polite galactic society. Now those same aliens were begging for that violence to save them. Tell them, he said slowly, that it looks like the galaxy finally needs the dangerous neighbors after all. Prep the fleet. Send word to all colonial commands. If we are going to do this, we are going to do it right. Commander Kim nodded and moved to her station. Around the bridge, officers began the complex process of preparing for war. Taman remained at the main viewport, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an entire species was facing extinction, and they had called on humanity for help. For the first time in his career, Admiral Park found himself hoping that humanity's reputation for violence was well-deserved, because something told him they were going to need every bit of that savage reputation before this was over. The distress call had been answered. Now came the hard part. The emergency meeting hall in Geneva was packed with the most powerful people on Earth. Fleet Admiral Kyung-Ho Lee stood at the front of the room facing the Human Defense Council. Behind him, massive screens showed the advancing alien threat that was consuming entire star systems. The Valian distress call reached us 18 hours ago, Admiral Lee began. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. Our deep space sensors have confirmed the threat is real. We are looking at biomechanical entities that appear to be consuming everything in their path. Secretary General Hee-Jin Choi leaned forward in her chair. She had been awake for 20 hours straight since the alien message arrived. Admiral, what exactly are we dealing with here? Colonel Donghyun Ryu stepped up to the display controls. He was the head of the Xenobiology Defense Division, a department that most people hoped would never be needed. Now it seemed like the most important job on Earth. Each enemy unit appears to be about the size of one of our Corvette-class ships, he explained. But they can make copies of themselves using any matter they consume. They have overwhelmed every alien fleet sent against them through pure numbers. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These were not politicians who scared easily, but the idea of self-replicating war machines was terrifying. How have the galactic powers been fighting them? Asked Defense Minister Jin Woo-han. Like a traditional war, Colonel Ryu replied. Energy weapons, shields, standard fleet tactics. The problem is that these devourers adapt to whatever kills them. They upgrade their defenses and become immune to the same attack. Admiral Lee nodded grimly. Which is exactly why they are losing. But humans do not fight traditional wars. Commander Mina Jung, the youngest officer in the room, raised her hand. At only 35, she was considered a rising star in the Earth Defense Forces. Sir, respectfully, why should we risk human lives for aliens who have spent centuries treating us like criminals? The question hung in the air like smoke. It was what half the room was thinking, but nobody else had been brave enough to say. The Valians and their allies had quarantined humanity to their own corner of space. They called humans violent barbarians who were too dangerous for civilized contact. Admiral Lee's expression softened slightly. Commander Jung, that is a fair question. The truth is, if we do not stop this threat now, it will eventually reach human space. Better to fight them there than here. He paused and looked around the room. But there is another reason. For generations, the galaxy has looked down on us. They see our willingness to fight as a flaw. Maybe it is time to show them what Deathworlders really do when innocent people need help. The debate continued for hours. Some argued that humanity owed the aliens nothing. Others pointed out that letting an entire species die was not something humans could live with. In the end, the vote was unanimous. Earth would answer the call. The orders went out across human space within minutes of the decision. Battle fleets from Mars, Europa, and the asteroid colonies began moving toward the staging area at Proxima Station. Ships that had never worked together started coordinating their movements. Captain Jae-wook Nam sat in the captain's chair of his ship Prometheus and laughed at his orders. 6 months ago, Prometheus had been a mining vessel. Now it was covered in armor plating and bristling with weapons. His crew of former asteroid miners looked more like pirates than soldiers. Well, boys, he announced over the ship's communication system, looks like we are going to war for people who think we are savages. This should be interesting. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Tae-young-oh was making final adjustments to their new weapon systems. Captain, he called over the comm, the railgun is online. The missile pods are loaded. We are as ready as a mining ship can be for a space battle. Good enough, Nam replied. If we are going to die fighting monsters, at least we will die as humans. At Titan Naval Base, Admiral Soonbok Park was addressing the captains of the 3rd Colonial Fleet. These were career military officers who had spent their lives preparing for a war that most people hoped would never come. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, we are about to do something that has never been done before. We are taking a human fleet outside our space to fight for another species. The enemy has beaten everyone who has faced them. They have superior numbers and adaptive technology. She smiled coldly. But they have never faced humans before. They have never fought an enemy that gets more dangerous when cornered. They have never dealt with a species that considers dying for strangers to be an honor. The preparation continued around the clock. Weapons that had been designed for fighting other humans were modified for use against unknown alien technology. Ships that had been built for patrol duty were fitted with armor and guns meant for much larger vessels. Dr. Nari Lim worked in her laboratory aboard the research ship Curiosity. She was one of Earth's leading experts on alien biology, though her experience was limited to studying dead samples. Now she was preparing for her first contact with living alien technology. The analysis of the Valian message shows that these devourers have organic components, she explained to her research team. They are not pure machines. That might be something we can use. Her assistant, Dr. Min-soo Park, looked up from his data pad. Dr. Lim, the organic parts might be vulnerable to biological weapons. Earth bacteria and viruses have evolved to be incredibly aggressive. What works on Earth life might work on alien life too. Dr. Lim nodded thoughtfully. Start preparing samples. If we get the chance to study these creatures, we need to be ready to find their weaknesses. Across human space, similar preparations were taking place. The Martian Defense Force loaded their ships with nuclear weapons. The Europa Deep Fleet prepared their ice-cutting lasers for use as weapons. The asteroid miners brought their rock-crushing, tools and attitude that came from working in the most dangerous places in the solar system. But perhaps the most important preparation was happening in the minds of the humans who would fight this war. They were not going to fight like the galactic powers. They would not engage in careful, measured combat designed to minimize losses. They would fight like humans, dirty, desperate, and determined to win, no matter the cost. Admiral Lee stood on the observation deck of his flagship and watched the fleet assemble. Ships from every corner of human space were arriving hourly. Some were military vessels built for war. Others were converted civilian ships that had volunteered for the mission. All of them carried humans who had answered the call to help people they had never met. People who had rejected them. People who needed them now more than they could possibly understand. Admiral, his aide approached with the final fleet count. We have 812 ships ready for deployment, a mix of military and civilian converted vessels. Admiral Lee nodded. It was not the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, but it might be the most determined. Send the word, he ordered. All ships are to proceed to the jump coordinates. Time to show the galaxy what Deathworlders do when someone needs saving. The human armada began its journey into unknown space, carrying with it the hopes of a dying alien species and the reputation of humanity itself. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Valian territory, like something from an alien nightmare. Where other galactic species built elegant ships with smooth curves and graceful lines, the humans brought pure function over form. Their vessels looked angry and dangerous even when they were not firing their weapons. High Counselor Thexera watched the tactical display from her command center on Valia Prime. Her crystalline form flickered with uncertainty as she studied the strange fleet that had answered their call. These are their warships? She asked War Commander Velthon. They look so primitive. Most of their weapons appear to be kinetic-based. How can they hope to fight the Devourers with such crude technology? Velthon studied the energy readings coming from the human ships. I am not sure, High Counselor. Their power signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Many of their ships appear to be converted civilian vessels. The answer to their questions came sooner than expected. Long-range sensors detected the approaching Devourer swarm. 3,000 enemy ships moving in perfect formation toward the human fleet. The aliens expected to witness the quick destruction of their would-be saviors. Instead, they witnessed something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. Captain Sahun Park stood on the bridge of his heavy cruiser, Retribution, and watched the enemy swarm approach. His crew had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Every weapon was loaded. Every system was ready. They had studied everything the Valians could tell them about Devourer tactics. All ships, this is Admiral Taman Park, came the voiceover, the fleet communication channel. You know what we are fighting for. You know why we are here. The enemy thinks they are facing another civilized fleet. Time to show them what uncivilized looks like. Captain Park smiled grimly. All hands, General. Quarters, weapons free. Let us introduce these things to human-style warfare. The human fleet did not engage at maximum range like every other species would. They did not try to disable enemy ships for study. They did not attempt to communicate or negotiate. They closed to knife-fighting distance and unleashed hell itself. Nuclear. Warheads detonated in brilliant flashes that lit up space like tiny suns. The Devourers had adapted their shields to stop energy weapons, but they had no defense against the raw power of splitting atoms. Kinetic weapons fired streams of metal at incredible speeds, punching through adaptive armor like it was paper. Commander Yujin Lee led her fighter squadron directly into the heart of the enemy swarm. Her pilots screamed war cries from human history as they delivered nuclear payloads at point-blank range. Ships that would have retreated when damaged instead pressed their attacks harder. Remember the Alamo. Remember Pearl Harbor, she shouted over the communications channel as her fighters dove through clouds of enemy fire. The Devourer swarm found itself facing something their programming had never encountered before. An enemy that fought harder when hurt. An enemy that took impossible risks. An enemy that seemed to prefer close combat over long-range fighting. When human ships took damage, they did not retreat to repair. They pushed forward and used their damaged hulls as weapons. Captain Jae-wook Nam watched his mining ship Prometheus lose half its armor, then ordered a ramming attack on the nearest Devourer capital ship. "If we are going down," he told his crew, "we are taking as many of them with us as possible." The converted mining vessel slammed into the alien ship at full speed. The explosion could be seen from the Valian command center 3 light minutes away. But for every human ship destroyed, dozens of Devourer vessels fell to weapons they could not adapt to fast enough. Nuclear fire burned through their biomechanical hulls. Kinetic weapons traveling at significant fractions of light speed simply overwhelmed their defenses through pure energy transfer. Dr. Nari Lim worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research ship Curiosity as the battle raged around them. Her ship was supposed to stay safe behind the battle line, but the human fleet was fighting so aggressively that there was no safe distance. "I am getting readings from the destroyed Devourer ships," she called to her research team over the sound of explosions. "The organic components are more extensive than we thought. They might be the key to their adaptation systems." Meanwhile, Admiral Taman Park coordinated the battle from his flagship Indomitable. His bridge crew worked with calm efficiency despite the chaos around them. Damage reports came in constantly, but so did reports of enemy ships destroyed. "Admiral," reported Commander So-young Kim, "we have lost 93 ships so far, but enemy losses are over 800 vessels. Their formation is breaking apart." Park nodded grimly. The cost was high, but they were winning. "All ships, maintain pressure. Do not let them regroup. Show them what happens when you threaten human friends." The tide of battle turned decisively when the Devourers tried their standard tactic of adapting to human weapons. But humans did not use standard weapons. Every ship in the fleet carried different armaments: mining lasers, construction explosives, scientific equipment turned into weapons of war. By the time the Devourers adapted to nuclear weapons, the humans were using kinetic kill vehicles. When they adapted to kinetic weapons, the humans switched to chemical explosives. When they adapted to explosives, human engineers jury-rigged new weapons from spare parts. The alien observers watching from Valia Prime could not believe what they were seeing. The mathematical probability of such a victory had been less than 1%. Yet the humans were not just winning, they were dominating. "Impossible," whispered War Commander Velthon. "How can they be so effective with such primitive technology?" "Hi." Counselor Thixara watched a human destroyer ram 3 enemy ships in sequence, destroying all 4 vessels in the process. "Perhaps their technology is not primitive," she said quietly. "Perhaps it is simply different." The battle ended after 6 hours of continuous fighting. The Devourer spearhead that had destroyed dozens of alien fleets was completely annihilated. Not a single enemy ship escaped to carry word back to their main force. The human fleet, battered but victorious, held position in space. They had lost nearly 200 ships, but they had saved the Valian system. More importantly, they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Earth's children had come to war, and war would never be the same again. Admiral Taman Park did not celebrate the victory. While the Valian leadership tried to understand what they had witnessed, he was already studying the wreckage of destroyed Devourer ships and planning his next moves. "Commander Kim, what did we learn from the battle?" he asked his intelligence officer. Commander So-young Kim pulled up the analysis data on her screen. "The Devourers adapt to energy-based weapons by changing their biometallic armor, but they cannot adapt to pure kinetic force or nuclear explosions. Their artificial intelligence seems designed to fight conventional galactic warfare." "Good. What about their production capabilities?" "Each unit can create copies of itself using available matter, sir. The rate appears to be exponential. Our long-range sensors have identified the main production centers in 3-star systems deep in former Valian space." Admiral Park studied the tactical display. Red markers showed where the main Devourer manufacturing facilities were located. They were heavily defended and constantly producing new units. A conventional assault would be suicide. "Classic mistake," he said finally. "They are thinking like an occupation force, not an extinction event. Send a message to all ship captains. We need to discuss new tactics." The meeting took place aboard the flagship Indomitable. Captains from across the human fleet gathered in the main briefing room. Some wore military uniforms. Others still had the work clothes of miners and cargo haulers. All of them had just survived the first battle against an enemy that had destroyed every other force sent against them. "People," Admiral Park began, "we won the first round, but this war is far from over. The enemy has production facilities that can replace their losses faster than we can destroy them. We need to think differently." Captain Ji-hoon Seo of the Stealth. Cruiser Shadow of Terror raised his hand. His ship was one of the experimental vessels that used advanced camouflage technology. "Admiral, what if we do not fight them conventionally at all? What if we use stealth and sabotage?" Admiral Park nodded. "Explain your thinking, Captain." "The Devourers expect direct assault. Every species they have fought has tried to meet them in open battle. But humans have experience with guerrilla warfare, sabotage, and asymmetric tactics. We could infiltrate their production facilities and destroy them from within." Dr. Nari Lim, who had been studying the captured Devourer technology, spoke up from her position at the back of the room. "I may have found something that could help with that approach. The organic components in their ships are not just for replication. They are part of the command and control system." She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Devourer vessel. "The biological parts are vulnerable to Earth-based pathogens. I have been working on a modified virus that could potentially turn their own systems against them." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Captain Min Seok Han, who commanded the Marine forces, leaned forward in his chair. "Doctor, are you suggesting biological warfare?" Dr. Lim nodded grimly. "It is not pleasant to consider, but these entities are not truly alive in any sense we would recognize. They are machines with organic components, and those components can be infected." Admiral Park made his decision quickly. "We will pursue multiple approaches simultaneously. Captain Seo, you will lead a stealth mission to infiltrate the primary production facility. Dr. Lim, you will continue developing your biological weapon. Captain Han, your Marines will prepare for boarding actions against Devourer ships." The plans were set in motion immediately. Captain Seo's stealth cruiser began modifications for a long-range infiltration mission. Dr. Lim's research team worked around the clock to perfect their viral weapon. The Marine Corps prepared for the most dangerous boarding actions in human history. But the most crucial element was psychological. The humans were fighting an enemy that relied on adaptation and overwhelming numbers. They needed to stay unpredictable, to constantly change their tactics before the Devourers could respond. Colonel Min Seok Han addressed his Marines in the shuttle bay of the assault carrier Normandy. These were men and women who had trained for boarding actions against human ships. Now they were preparing to fight inside alien vessels with unknown layouts and hostile environments. "Listen up," he said, his voice carrying easily over the assembled troops. "We are about to do something that has never been done before. We are going to board enemy ships while they are still fighting. The Devourers are used to long-range combat. We are going to get up close and personal." Sergeant Young Jae Kim raised his hand. He was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion and had seen more combat than most soldiers twice his age. "Sir, what do we know about fighting these things in enclosed spaces?" "Not much," Han admitted. "But we know they adapt to whatever kills them, so we are going to hit them with everything at once. Explosives, bullets, fire, electricity. We will not give them time to adapt to any one weapon." The assault began 3 days later across 7 different systems. The human fleet split into smaller task forces and attacked multiple targets simultaneously. The Devourers, expecting a conventional fleet engagement, found themselves fighting a dozen different battles at once. Captain Seo's stealth mission launched first. His modified cruiser Shadow of Terror slipped through the outer defenses of the main production facility using advanced camouflage and electronic warfare systems. His crew of volunteers knew they were unlikely to return, but they were determined to deliver their payload. "Remember," SEO told his crew over the intercom, "we only get one chance at this. The biological weapon has to be deployed directly into their central processing core. Once we start the attack, they will know we are here." At the same time, Colonel Han's Marines were conducting boarding actions against Devourer capital ships. Using modified mining pods as assault craft, They breached enemy hulls and fought their way toward crucial systems. The battles were brutal and desperate, with humans using every weapon they could carry. "Move! Move! Move!" Han shouted as his troops cleared another corridor. The inside of the Devourer ship was like a nightmare maze of organic and mechanical components. Strange growths pulsed along the walls while mechanical systems hummed with alien purpose. The Marines fought with the desperation of people who knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. But they had advantages the Devourers had never faced before. Human tactics emphasized flexibility and aggression. When one weapon stopped working, they switched to another immediately. Dr. Lim monitored the progress from her research ship. Her biological weapon was showing promising results in laboratory tests. The modified Earth viruses attacked the organic components of Devourer technology with vicious efficiency. "The viral agent is breaking down their command structures," she reported to Admiral Park. "If we can get it into their main production facilities, it should spread through their entire network." The battles raged for hours. Human forces took heavy casualties, but they were achieving their objectives. Devourer production facilities were being destroyed or compromised. Their command and control networks were being disrupted by biological agents. Most importantly, the humans were proving that the supposedly unstoppable enemy could be stopped. They just had to be willing to fight dirty, take risks, and use every advantage their violent history had given them. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes being called barbarians was not an insult. Sometimes it was exactly what civilization needed to survive. The final assault on the Devourer core worlds began with something the galaxy had never seen before. Humans deploying biological warfare on a scale that spanned entire star systems. Dr. Nari Lim's modified Earth viruses were loaded onto stealth ships and volunteer fighters, ready to be delivered directly into the heart of enemy territory. Captain Jae-wook Nam watched his heavily damaged ship Prometheus struggle through the outer defenses of the primary Devourer production facility. Half his crew was dead or wounded, but they maintained course toward their target. The converted mining vessel had been transformed into a weapon of war, but it was never meant for this kind of punishment. "Sir," called Engineer Taeyong-oh from his damage control station. Blood streamed down his face from a head wound, but his hands remained steady on his controls. "We are losing hull integrity on multiple decks. Reactor containment is down to 20%. Can we reach the target?" Nam asked his navigator. Lieutenant Sujin Park, her uniform torn and stained with coolant fluid, managed a grim smile. "We will make it, Captain. Might not make it back, but we will deliver our payload." Around them, the human fleet was dying. But they were taking the Devourers with them in numbers that defied all military logic. For every human ship lost, dozens of enemy vessels fell to weapons that seemed to change with every attack. The key to human success was their complete unpredictability. Where other species fought according to established doctrines and careful strategies, humans threw out the rulebook entirely. Mining ships rammed capital vessels. Scientists turned research equipment into weapons. Engineers built new guns from spare parts in the middle of battle. Captain Ji-hoon Seo piloted his stealth cruiser Shadow of Terra through the maze of defenses surrounding the main production complex. His mission was the most critical of all. Carried the master sample of Dr. Lim's biological weapon, ready to be deployed directly into the enemy command structure. "Target acquired," reported his weapons officer. "We have a clear path to the central processing core." SEO nodded grimly. "Remember everyone, this is a one-way trip. But if we succeed here, we end this war. Make your families proud." The Shadow of Terra launched its payload and immediately came under massive enemy fire. The ship's stealth systems failed as Devourer weapons tore through its hull, but the biological weapon was already spreading through the alien facilities, organic networks. Meanwhile, Admiral Taemin Park coordinated the battle from his flagship Indomitable. His bridge had taken damage from multiple enemy attacks, but his crew continued their duties with professional calm. Around him, officers worked at damaged stations while emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls. "Status report," he called out over the sound of explosions. Commander So-young Kim, her uniform stained with smoke and debris, replied from her station. Primary target is showing cascade failures, sir. The biological weapon has compromised 67% of their organic command structures. Enemy coordination is breaking down across all sectors. On the main screen, they watch the massive biomechanical complex that had spawned countless killing machines begin to consume itself. Dr. Lim's modified viruses had turned the Devourer's own replication systems against them, creating an autoimmune response that spread through their entire network. But the cost had been terrible. Of the 800 ships that had answered the Valian call for help, fewer than 200 remained combat-ready. The casualty lists would be long, and every name represented someone who had died fighting for people they had never met. Captain. Sehun Park's heavy cruiser Retribution had been reduced to a drifting wreck, but her crew kept fighting from auxiliary control. When their main weapons failed, they used escape pods as guided missiles. When those ran out, they rammed enemy vessels with pieces of their own ship. "All hands, this is the captain," Park announced over the ship's communication system. "We have done our duty. The enemy is falling back. If we do not make it home, know that we fought for something greater than ourselves." Colonel Min Seok-han led his Marines in a desperate boarding action against the last functioning Devourer command ship. His troops had been fighting for 18 hours straight, using weapons and equipment scavenged from destroyed enemies. They moved through the alien corridors like the experienced soldiers they were, but everyone could see the exhaustion in their movements. "Almost there," Han called to his remaining troops. "The command center is just ahead. One more push and we can shut down their local network." The Marines burst into the central chamber and found themselves face to face with something that looked like a fusion of machine and living tissue. It pulsed with alien intelligence and responded to their presence with mechanical hostility. But it had never encountered humans before, and it was not prepared for their tactics. Instead of trying to understand or communicate with the entity, the Marines simply destroyed it with every weapon they had. Explosives, bullets, flamethrowers, and improvised chemical weapons all struck the target simultaneously. The alien intelligence had no time to adapt before it was completely annihilated. Dr. Lim monitored the biological weapon's progress from her research ship Curiosity. Her viral agents were spreading faster than anyone had predicted, jumping from ship to ship through the Devourer's own communication networks. What had started as sabotage was becoming a complete system failure. "Admiral," she transmitted to the flagship, "the viral infection has reached critical mass. The enemy's organic components are breaking down across multiple star systems. They are losing the ability to coordinate their forces." As the Devourer threat collapsed into chaos and self-destruction, a strange quiet fell across the battlefield. Ships that had been locked in desperate combat just moments before found themselves facing an enemy that was suddenly fighting itself. The humans had done something that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy could not accomplish. They had not just defeated the Devourers through superior firepower or technology. They had turned the enemy's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and replicate, into their greatest weakness. But victory had come at a price that would be felt across human space for generations. Heroes had died in battles that would become legend. Captain Ji-hoon Seo, whose sacrifice had delivered the killing blow to the enemy command structure. Captain Jae-wook Nam, whose mining crew had fought like seasoned warriors. Colonel Min Seok-han, whose Marines had proven that humans could fight anything, anywhere. Admiral Park stood on the observation deck of his damaged flagship and watched the last Devourer ships fall silent. Around him, the wreckage of both fleets drifted in the void. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had called on humanity's capacity for violence to save them from extinction. Now they would have to live with the consequences of that decision. The universe had seen what Deathworlders could do when properly motivated, and nothing would ever be the same again. 6 months after the last Devourer ship went silent, High Counselor Thexera stood before the Galactic Assembly on Concordia Prime. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from hundreds of species, all of whom had heard the stories of what happened in Valian space. The same delegates who had refused aid during the crisis now listened with complete attention as she spoke. "Honored representatives," she began, her crystalline form blazing with intensity. I stand before you today to speak of courage. Not the courage of my own people, for we showed little when death came to our door. I speak of the courage of those we called barbarians. A murmur ran through the assembly. Everyone knew who she was talking about. The humans. The Deathworlders who had been quarantined to their corner of space for being too violent for civilized contact. The devourer swarms consumed 17 of our star systems, Thexara continued. Our fleets were broken. Our colonies were empty. We called upon the great powers of the galaxy for help, and they turned away. They called us acceptable losses. Praetor Zixthon of the galactic hegemony shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His species had been among the first to refuse aid to the Valians, citing the threat as too great for their forces to handle. But there was one species that answered our call, Thexara said, her voice growing stronger. The humans came when no one else would. They fought when others ran. They died for people they had never met, people who had rejected them. War Commander Velthon, now serving as Valian ambassador to Earth, stepped forward to address the assembly. His bioluminescent patches glowed with what humans would have recognized as anger. Some of you question their methods, he said, looking directly at the hegemony delegation. You call them crude, uncivilized. You are correct. Their weapons were simple, their tactics were brutal. But they worked. He activated a holographic display showing the battle statistics. In 6 days of fighting, the humans accomplished what our combined fleets could not do in 6 months. They did not just defeat the devourers, they eliminated the threat completely. In the human section of the gallery, Ambassador Unye Yun watched the proceedings with diplomatic patience. Since the victory, everything had changed for humanity. Ships that once avoided human space now requested escort missions. Colonies that had banned human traders were suddenly interested in defense contracts. The transformation was not just political. Throughout the galaxy, military academies were studying human battle tactics. The hegemony had quietly requested training exchanges. Even the ancient Eternal Collective had begun analyzing human strategic thinking. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed conflict itself. For centuries, galactic civilization had been based on the idea that violence was primitive, and that advanced species should solve problems through negotiation and technology. The humans had proven that sometimes, violence was the only answer. That worked. Admiral Kyung-Ho Lee addressed the assembly via quantum transmission from Earth Command. His image appeared above the assembly floor, larger than life and impossible to ignore. The galaxy has learned an important lesson, he said, his voice echoing through the Great Hall. Peace is not maintained by avoiding conflict. Peace is maintained by being willing to fight for what matters when all other options fail. He paused, letting his words sink in. Humanity did not seek this role. We were content in our corner of space, building our worlds and raising our children. But when the call came, when innocent people needed help, we answered. His expression grew serious. And we will answer again if needed, because that is what Deathworlders do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. As the session concluded, Ambassador Yoon filed her report to Earth Command. The political landscape of the galaxy was changing rapidly. Trade agreements were being renegotiated. Defense pacts were being proposed. Species that had spent centuries avoiding humanity were now desperately trying to understand them. But in the outer territories of human space, life went on much as it always had. The miners and colonists and traders who had answered the Valian call were back to their daily work. They had heard the call to help, done their duty, and now returned to the business of survival on worlds that would kill most other species. Captain Nari Kim, formerly Dr. Lim, now commanded the First Joint, human alien research vessel. Her team of human and Valian scientists worked together to study the remnants of devourer technology, looking for ways to turn instruments of destruction into tools of creation. The biological components show remarkable adaptability, she explained, to her mixed crew. If we can understand how they work, we might be able to develop new medical treatments, maybe even regenerative therapies. Her Valian colleague, science leader Keithon, studied the data with fascination. Your species has a gift for finding constructive uses for destructive technology. This could benefit the entire galaxy. Captain Minsu Park commanded the rebuilt mining ship New Prometheus, working the asteroid fields of the outer colonies. His crew was a mix of veterans from the Devourer War and young colonists who had heard the stories but never seen combat themselves. "Tell us about the battle again," asked engineer Young-Soo Lee, barely old enough to have served if the war had lasted longer. Park smiled and shook his head. "There is not much to tell. We went where we were needed. We did what had to be done, and we came home." But the veteran crew members understood what he was not saying. They had seen friends die for strangers. They had fought impossible odds and won through sheer determination. They had proven that humanity's capacity for violence was matched only by their capacity for sacrifice. Admiral Taman Park stood in his office on Proxima Station, looking out at the stars. On his desk lay reports from across human space. Colony worlds were expanding at record rates. Trade with alien species had increased by 300%. Applications to join the Earth Defense Forces had tripled, but the most important changes were harder to measure. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as the violent outcasts they had been painted as, but as the guardians who stood ready when civilization needed protection. His aide entered with the daily briefings. "Sir, we have received 17 new requests for security consultations. The Synthesis Collective wants to discuss joint patrol missions, and the Valians are asking about establishing a permanent human presence in their territory." Admiral Park nodded. "What is our response?" "The same as always, sir. Humanity stands ready to help those who need it." Outside his window, human ships moved through space with quiet confidence. They were no longer the pariahs of the galaxy. They were its protectors. And everyone knew that when the next threat appeared, when diplomacy failed and civilization trembled, there would be Deathworlders, ready to answer the call. Because that was what humans did. They endured. They fought. And they stood guard so others could live in peace. The galaxy had called for its most dangerous children when extinction came knocking, and those children had answered with the fury of Earth and the determination that only came from a species forged in the crucible of a death world. The universe was safer for their presence, even if it would never be quite the same.